In the shadows of galactic history, where legends blur into myth and truth dissolves beneath centuries of dust, there exists a name that still echoes through the corridors of time. Darth Malgus, not a phantom of ancient prophecy, but a living embodiment of pure, unadulterated warfare, a Sith Lord who walked willingly into the heart of the Jedi Temple and emerged victorious, his armor scorched, his blade dripping with the blood of peacekeepers, and his vision of the galaxy forever changed. This is not a tale of political maneuvering from distant thrones or calculated schemes whispered in shadow chambers. Malgus cared nothing for such games. His story is written in lightsaber burns across battlefields, in the ashes of conquered worlds, and in the twisted philosophy that conflict itself is the purest expression of the Force. Where other Sith Lords sought power through cunning and manipulation, Malgus simply took what he wanted through overwhelming brutal force. Born 3,700 years before the Battle of Yavin, during an era when the Sith Empire had just begun to re-emerge from centuries of hiding in the unknown regions, Malgus would become one of the most feared warriors of his age. He led the recapture of the ancient Sith homeworld of Korriban. He devastated Alderaan in a surprise assault that shook the Republic to its core. He personally commanded the attack that brought the Jedi Temple itself to ruin and forced the Republic to its knees. But beyond these achievements, beyond the body count and the conquered territories, Malgus represented something far more dangerous to both Sith and Jedi alike. He was a revolutionary who dared to question the very foundations upon which the Sith Empire was built. He fell in love with an alien slave in defiance of imperial prejudices. He advocated for reform, for inclusion, for strength drawn from unity, rather than enforced through domination. And when the Empire refused to change, when they chose political leverage over total victory, Malgus did what few Sith had ever dared. He turned his back on the Empire entirely and declared himself the founder of a new empire, one that would purge the galaxy through endless war until only the strong remained. His is a story of contradictions, a man capable of tenderness who chose to destroy what he loved most, a warrior who reveled in bloodshed yet possessed a keen strategic mind, a Sith Lord who challenged orthodoxy while embracing the dark side more completely than most of his peers, a conqueror who ultimately sought freedom not for others, but for himself alone. This is the complete history of Darth Malgus, from his birth on a storm-racked imperial world to his repeated returns from apparent death, defying both Republic heroes and Sith rulers who thought him destroyed. Let the tale unfold. The birth of Varadun, the planet Dromund Kaas, loomed dark beneath perpetual storm clouds. Lightning cracked across purple skies, illuminating vast temples and imperial architecture that stretched toward heavens they would never reach. This was the capital of the reconstituted Sith Empire, a civilization that had spent over 1,000 years rebuilding in secret after their devastating defeat at the hands of the Republic. Here, in the year 3701 before the Battle of Yavin, a child was born who would reshape galactic history. His name was Varadun. He was human, pale-skinned and strong even in infancy, born not to some ancient Sith bloodline, but to more humble origins. Records indicate he was raised by an adoptive father, a man who served the Imperial Science Bureau as a biologist. This father maintained a private zoo on a world other than Dromund Kaas, funded by Imperial grants, where he collected and studied various creatures from across known space. Young Veradun spent his childhood among these animals, feeding them, cleaning their enclosures, learning their behaviors and patterns. It should have been an ordinary upbringing for a Force-sensitive child in Imperial space, where such gifts were recognized, cultivated, and weaponized for the glory of the Sith Empire. But Veradun was never ordinary. Even before formal training, before any master took him under their wing, the darkness called to him with a voice louder than thunder. The Sith Empire of this era was a society built upon the ruins of failure and the determination never to fail again. When the original Sith Empire had fallen millennia earlier, Lord Vitiate had led the survivors into the unknown regions and forged them into something new. They shed their weakness, honed their strength, and waited with the patience of predators for the perfect moment to strike. By the time of Veradun's birth, that moment was approaching. The Empire had rebuilt its military, established colonies across dozens of hidden worlds, and prepared for the day they would announce their return to a republic that had grown complacent in victory. This was the world into which Veradun was born, a society where strength was the only virtue that mattered, where compassion was viewed as disease, and where the strong were expected to dominate the weak without mercy or hesitation. Young Veradun proved himself worthy of this philosophy even before reaching adolescence. The specific circumstances that revealed his Force sensitivity and his commitment to Sith ideals involved one of his father's servants, a female Twi'lek who worked on the estate. Historical records don't specify what minor offense this woman committed, if any. The details are lost to time, buried beneath the weight of greater atrocities that would follow. What matters is that the offense itself was meaningless to young Veradun. He killed her anyway, not in rage, not in the heat of passion, but deliberately, coldly. He killed her to prove to himself that he could, to demonstrate that he possessed the will to take a life without hesitation, to show that he understood the fundamental truth of the dark side. That power means nothing if you lack the conviction to use it. When his father discovered what had occurred, he did not punish the boy. In most civilizations across the galaxy, such an act would have resulted in horror, in counseling, in attempts to understand what had gone wrong in the child's development. But on an Imperial world, in a Sith society, young Veradun's action was seen for what it truly was, proof of his potential. His father was pleased. The biologist immediately contacted the Sith Academy on Droman Kos. This was not merely ambition speaking, though pride surely played its role. In the Sith Empire, Force-sensitive children were not of families to keep. They belonged to the Empire, to be forged into weapons for the glory of the Sith. To hide such potential was to commit treason. To reveal it was to serve. The day before Veradun was to leave for the academy, his father took him on one final tour of his zoo. This was not a gesture of sentimentality, though perhaps some small affection existed between adoptive father and son. Rather, it was a teaching moment. As they walked among the cages and enclosures, the biologist used the animals as living illustrations to impart 3 critical lessons that would shape Veradun's philosophy for the rest of his life. The first lesson concerned personal conduct. His father showed him predators and prey, pointing out how the strong survived by being true to their nature. A hunting beast that hesitated would starve. A prey animal that failed to remain vigilant would be devoured. The lesson was clear. Know what you are, and be it completely without doubt or restraint. The second lesson involved deception. His father demonstrated how certain creatures used camouflage, mimicry, and false displays to achieve their goals. A harmless insect that resembled a venomous one, a plant that attracted prey with sweet scents before consuming them. Deception, his father explained, was not weakness, but another form of strength to be employed when direct action would fail. The third lesson dealt with expectations. His father showed Vera Dune animals that adapted to changing circumstances, that learned and evolved, that defied what observers thought they could do. The lesson here was never to assume anything about an opponent, never to think victory was assured, and never to believe that the galaxy would conform to one's expectations rather than harsh reality. These three lessons to be true to one's nature, to use deception as a tool, and to adapt to reality rather than expecting reality to adapt, would echo through Vera Dune's life as Darth Malgus. They would inform his strategies, his philosophy, and ultimately his decision to betray the empire he had served for decades. But that betrayal lay far in the future. For now, young Vera Dune was simply a boy departing his home for the first time, bound for the Sith Academy on Dromund Kaas, where he would be transformed into a weapon of the dark side. The Sith Academy, the Academy on Dromund Kaas, was not a school in any traditional sense. It was a crucible, a place where the weak were broken and discarded, while the strong were forged into instruments of the Empire's will. Students were pitted against each other in constant competition, forced to prove their worth not through academic achievement, but through dominance, through victory, through survival. The Academy's architecture reflected its purpose: massive stone walls carved with ancient Sith runes, training chambers where students dueled under the watchful eyes of overseers who intervened only to prevent promising talent from being eliminated prematurely, dark corridors where rivalries were settled without official sanction, where the strong preyed upon the weak, and where death was not uncommon. Vera Dune thrived in this environment, even among the other students, all of whom had demonstrated force sensitivity and capacity for cruelty sufficient to earn entrance. Vera Dune stood out. He was tall for his age and growing taller, with broad shoulders and a physical presence that demanded attention. But it was not his size alone that set him apart. It was his absolute commitment to conflict, his genuine love of battle, and his understanding that hesitation was death. The instructors at the Academy recognized his potential immediately. Here was not just another angry youth channeling rage into power, though Vera Dune certainly possessed rage in abundance. Here was a student who understood on an instinctive level what many Sith spent years learning: that the dark side demanded commitment, that it rewarded those who embraced it without reservation, and that true power came not from controlling one's emotions, but from channeling them with perfect clarity of purpose. Multiple Force users served as Vera Dune's instructors during his early training. Each contributed to his development, teaching him the fundamentals of lightsaber combat, the basics of Force manipulation, and the philosophy that separated Sith from Jedi. Where the Jedi taught restraint and selflessness, the Sith preached passion and self-interest. Where Jedi sought peace, Sith embraced conflict. Where Jedi served the Republic, Sith served only themselves and the Empire that enabled their ascension. Veradun absorbed these teachings like dry ground soaking up rain. The philosophy resonated with something deep within him, some fundamental understanding of the universe that aligned perfectly with Sith doctrine. He came to believe, and would believe for the rest of his life, that conflict was not merely inevitable, but necessary. That through struggle, the weak were culled and the strong were refined. That peace was stagnation, and stagnation was death. During this period at the Academy, Veradun caught the attention of a particularly significant figure, Darth Vindican, a Sith pureblood lord whose power and reputation made him one of the more formidable masters within the Academy's ranks. Vindican saw in Veradun not just potential, but excellence, a raw talent that needed only proper refinement to become something extraordinary. When Vindican offered to take Veradun as his formal apprentice, it represented a tremendous honor. To be personally selected by a Darth, to receive direct tutelage from a Lord, rather than training in groups under lesser instructors, marked Veradun as exceptional even among the Academy's most promising students. Veradun accepted without hesitation. From that moment forward, his training intensified. Vindican pushed him relentlessly, testing not just his combat skills, but his cunning, his endurance, and his commitment to the dark side. They trained in lightsaber combat for hours each day until Veradun's muscles burned and his hands bled. They practiced force techniques until he could fling objects with his mind as easily as throwing them with his hands. They studied Sith history and philosophy, learning from the triumphs and failures of ancient lords. During this apprenticeship, Veradun traveled with his master on various missions throughout the Empire. These journeys served multiple purposes. They exposed the young apprentice to combat situations where his training could be tested in real rather than simulated conditions. They allowed Vindican to observe his students' progress and identify areas requiring further work. And they began building Veradun's reputation within the broader Imperial military structure as a rising warrior of significant promise. One particular journey would prove more significant than either master or apprentice could have anticipated. They traveled to Geonosis, a harsh desert world in the Outer Rim known for its droid foundries and insectoid inhabitants. The mission's specific objectives have been lost to history, but what occurred there would change Veradun's life forever. The discovery of Elena Daru Geonosis was a planet of rust-colored stone and perpetual heat, where massive hive structures rose from barren landscapes, and the native Geonosians conducted their affairs in vast underground complexes. It was also, during this period, a world where slavery flourished. The Geonosians were not above capturing or purchasing sentient beings to use as labor in conditions their own kind would refuse. In the dark cells of a Geonosian slave pen, Veradun discovered a young Twi'lek female named Elena Daru. She was Rutian blue-skinned rather than the more common green or red hues of other Twi'lek ethnic groups. Her leku, the prehensile head tails that were a defining feature of her species, bore the scars of hard treatment. When Veradun found her, she was being beaten by her owner for some trivial failure in her duties. What happened next defines much of Malgus's character and the contradictions that would define his existence. Veradun killed the slaver, not to rescue Elena out of compassion, but because he wanted her for himself. She became his property, his slave, just as she had been the Geonosian slave. The Transfer of ownership was accomplished through violence, certainly, but it remained a transfer of ownership nonetheless. Yet something unexpected developed between them. Alina was not simply decorative. She was intelligent, capable, and despite the horrors she had endured, possessed a strength of spirit that Veradun found compelling. Rather than relegating her to menial tasks, he began to train her in basic combat. She learned to shoot with remarkable accuracy, wielding twin blaster pistols with a skill that would serve them both in battles to come. She accompanied him on missions, fighting at his side rather than cowering behind him. And slowly, incrementally, their relationship transformed from master and slave into something neither the Sith Empire nor its social norms could easily accommodate. They became lovers. This was not a casual dalliance or a Sith Lord taking his pleasure from property. Veradun, who would soon take the name Malgus, genuinely fell in love with Alina Daru, and she, despite all reason and survival instinct that should have told her to fear and hate her captor, fell in love with him in return. It was forbidden. The Sith Empire of this era maintained strict policies regarding interspecies relationships, particularly between humans and what they considered lesser alien species. Such unions were seen as diluting the purity of imperial bloodlines, as weakness, as betrayal of fundamental imperial values. For a rising Sith Lord to openly claim a Twi'lek as his consort would have been social and political suicide, so they kept their relationship hidden. In public, Veradun treated Alina as a valued servant, a skilled soldier who served at his pleasure. Only in private, away from imperial eyes, did he allow himself to be Veradun with her. Only with Alina was he permitted to drop the mask of the Sith and simply be a man capable of tenderness as well as brutality. She was the only person allowed to call him by his birth name. Everyone else knew him by the Sith moniker he had adopted upon his promotion, Malgus. The name meant hammer in an ancient Sith dialect, and it suited him perfectly. He was blunt force made manifest, a warrior who broke through obstacles rather than circumventing them. Where other Sith preferred subtlety and manipulation, Malgus believed in overwhelming strength properly applied. Where others schemed and plotted, he simply destroyed whatever stood in his path. But with Alina, in those private moments, he was still Veradun, still the man who could feel something other than rage and ambition, still capable of the very attachments that Sith philosophy condemned as weakness. This contradiction, a Sith Lord who embraced the dark side completely while maintaining a secret relationship built on genuine affection, would define Malgus for years to come. It would be used against him by rivals who discovered his secret. It would cause him to spare enemies who showed mercy to Alina, and ultimately it would lead to one of the most ruthless decisions of his entire life. But that tragedy lay years ahead. For now, Malgus and Alina fought side by side across numerous battlefields as the Empire began its long-planned return to known space. The Great Galactic War begins in the year 3681 before the Battle of Yavin. The Sith Empire finally revealed itself to a republic that had believed them extinct for over 1,000 years. The announcement came not through diplomatic channels or formal declarations, but through military action. Sith forces emerged from the unknown regions in overwhelming strength, striking simultaneously at dozens of Republic worlds along the Outer Rim. Colonies were attacked, Republic warships were destroyed. And the galaxy suddenly realized that the ancient enemy had returned, stronger than ever, hungry for vengeance. Thus began the Great Galactic War, a conflict that would rage for decades and cost billions of lives. Malgus, though still young by Sith standards and not yet risen to the heights of power he would later achieve, found himself in the thick of the fighting from the war's inception. This was what he had trained for, what he had been made for. Not political maneuvering or scholarly pursuits, but war in its purest form. He reveled in it. His journals from this period, which would later be studied by none other than Darth Sidious himself and included in the Dark Lord's anthology known as the Book of Sith, reveal Malgus's philosophy of combat with stark clarity. He wrote of battle as exhilaration, describing conflict as the Force's truest expression. When his forces suffered heavy losses, he did not mourn the dead. Instead, he saw their deaths as beneficial, as the necessary culling of the weak that made the survivors stronger. An easy conquest would count for little, he wrote, but this glorious bloodbath benefits both sides. With each corpse we create, we expose the lie of their offensive pacifism. Those who perish in our own ranks are like knots shaved from a stake of real wood. We grow sharper with each slice of the knife. This was not the philosophy of a commander who valued his troops' lives or sought to minimize casualties. Malgus cared nothing for such conventional military wisdom. He believed that those who died in battle were meant to die, that their weakness had been exposed and removed from the pool of warriors. The survivors were stronger for having been tested so harshly. The Force itself, he believed, was refining the Sith through conflict. During these early years of the war, Malgus led campaigns across the Outer Rim territories, working to establish Sith dominance over systems that the Republic had long considered securely within their sphere. He fought alongside Alina in most of these engagements, the two of them becoming something of a legend among the Imperial troops who served under Malgus's command. The sight of the towering Sith Lord and his blue-skinned companion fighting back to back became a symbol of Sith strength and determination. But the war's first truly significant engagement for Malgus personally came when the Empire turned its attention to a world of tremendous symbolic importance to the Sith, Korriban, the Battle of Korriban, the ancient homeworld of the Sith, a desert planet where the tombs of legendary Dark Lords had stood for millennia, where the original Sith species had first encountered the fallen Jedi who would take their name and build an empire in the darkness. Though the Republic had no significant military interest in the world, they had maintained a presence there since their victory in the Great Hyperspace War over 1,000 years prior. For the resurgent Sith Empire, reclaiming Korriban was not merely strategic, it was spiritual. The task of recapturing the sacred world fell to Darth Vindican and his apprentice, Malgus. The Republic garrison on Korriban was centered around a space station in orbit above the planet with minimal forces on the surface. The Sith strategy was straightforward: board the station, eliminate the defenders, and reclaim their ancestral home. Vindican and Malgus would lead the assault personally, accompanied by a force of elite Sith warriors. Their approach aboard a Fury-class Imperial interceptor was unopposed until they breached the station's hull. Then, as they moved through the corridors toward the hangar where most of the station's defenders had rallied, they encountered unexpected resistance. Two Jedi awaited them. The first was Cao Tsen Darak, a Zabrak Jedi master of considerable power and reputation. A warrior scholar who had survived dozens of campaigns during the preceding decades, Darak was considered one of the finest duelists in the Jedi Order. His connection to the Force was deep, his skills honed by years of training in combat. The second was his Padawan, a young human woman named Satele Shan. She would one day become Grand Master of the entire Jedi Order, but at this moment she was merely an apprentice, talented but inexperienced, thrust into combat against two Sith Lords when she should have been training at the temple on Coruscant. The confrontation began immediately. Darak and Vindican engaged while Malgus faced Satele. The difference in experience was immediately apparent. Malgus dominated the young Padawan with contemptuous ease, his size and strength overwhelming her attempts at defense. She barely managed to hold him off, and only Darak's intervention, tossing his lightsaber to his apprentice to even the odds, gave Satele a chance to regain her footing. But Vindican, seeing his apprentice pressed, unleashed a blast of Force lightning at Satele. This proved to be a tactical error. Darak responded by using the Force to hurl Vindican away from the combatants, causing the Sith Master to crash into a nearby smuggler's vessel that happened to be docked at the station. The ship belonged to Nico Okar, a cargo runner who found himself suddenly in the middle of a battle between Sith and Jedi, with absolutely no desire to be there. While Vindican recovered, Malgus pressed his attack against Satele with renewed fury. But the young Jedi was learning quickly, adapting to his style, and Darak's masterful control of the duel prevented Malgus from landing a killing blow. The four combatants, 3 Force users and 1 increasingly panicked smuggler, found themselves in a violent dance as Okar tried desperately to get his ship started while the Jedi fought to give him time. The tide turned when Darak fully engaged Vindican. Despite his age and the pure-blood Sith's power, Darak was simply the better warrior. He scored a vicious slash across Vindican's face, then followed with a lightsaber thrust that drove through the Sith Master's chest. Vindican fell, grievously wounded, as Darak turned to assist his Padawan against Malgus. Realizing the battle was turning against them, and knowing that Satele and the smuggler were close to escaping, Malgus called his fallen master's lightsaber to his hand. Now, wielding 2 blades in the Jarkai style, he pressed forward with savage intensity. He battered aside the chunks of machinery and debris that Darak threw at him with the Force. He knocked Satele's weapon from her grasp, and as Darak moved to shield his apprentice with his own body, Malgus cut the Jedi Master down. The killing blow was brutal and efficient. Malgus's blade punched through Darak's defense and pierced his heart. The Zabrak Jedi Master, one of the finest warriors of his generation, fell dead at his apprentice's feet. But there was no time for Malgus to savor victory. Satele, channeling her grief and rage, unleashed a massive Force push that sent both Sith flying backward. The power behind the blast was extraordinary, far beyond what a Padawan should have been capable of. Later, some would attribute this to the Shan bloodline's legendary connection to the Force. Others would say it was simply grief transforming into power. The dark side, temporarily accessible to a Jedi, pushed beyond her limits. Whatever the source, the blast gave Satele and Okar the seconds they needed. The smuggler's ship blasted out of the hangar, escaping into hyperspace before the Sith could stop them. Zatela Shan had survived, carrying with her the news that the Sith had returned in force and were led by warriors of terrifying capability. Malgus stood in the blood-stained hangar, his master dying at his feet, and felt only contempt. Vindican, barely clinging to life, tried to speak of the battle's outcome. He attempted to frame it as a victory despite the Jedi's escape, but Malgus saw only failure. His master had been wounded, had been bested by a Jedi, had allowed enemies to escape to carry warning to the Republic. Weakness. The dark side demanded that weakness be purged, so Malgus raised his lightsaber and struck his own master down. The killing was methodical. Vindican's protests died in his throat as Malgus's blade severed his head from his shoulders. There was no rage in the act, no passionate fury, just cold acknowledgement that Darth Vindican had proven himself unworthy, and the dark side rewarded strength while punishing weakness. As his master's body fell, as the Sith fleet descended toward Korriban's surface to begin the reconquest, Malgus stood alone in the hangar and felt the Force surge around him with unprecedented intensity. This was his moment, his test, and he had passed it. The vision on Korriban. With the space station secured and the thin Republic garrison on Korriban's surface quickly routed, the ancient Sith world belonged once more to the Empire. For Malgus, newly freed from the constraints of apprenticeship and soon to be elevated to the full rank of Sith Lord with the title Darth formally bestowed upon him, this victory held profound personal significance. In the days following the battle, Malgus made his first pilgrimage to Korriban's surface. He walked alone through the rocky deserts, through the dusty canyons lined with the tombs of Sith Lords whose names were legend even thousands of years after their deaths. The Valley of the Dark Lords stretched before him, monuments to power that had shaped galactic history. He felt the Force everywhere on this world. It permeated the stone, echoed through the ancient tombs, whispered secrets from ages past. The dark side was stronger here than anywhere Malgus had experienced, concentrated by millennia of Sith occupation and the presence of so many powerful practitioners. Walking these sacred grounds, Malgus felt a profound sense of connection to the heritage he had claimed, to the legacy of darkness he would continue. And then, without warning, the Force showed him a vision. These sorts of visions were not uncommon for powerful Force users. The future and the past existed simultaneously in the Force's timeless perspective, and sometimes those sensitive to its currents could glimpse possibilities and portents. But this was no vague premonition or symbolic dream. This was vivid and immediate, real enough to make Malgus question whether he was still experiencing physical reality or had somehow been transported forward through time. He saw the galaxy burning, worlds aflame, civilizations crumbling, the Republic collapsing under the weight of Sith fury, the Jedi Order scattered and broken, their temples reduced to ash, their teachings revealed as the lies they had always been. And standing at the center of this conflagration, having brought this necessary destruction to the galaxy, was Malgus himself. The vision showed him more than mere conquest. It revealed to him his purpose. Malgus had always believed he was born to fight, that warfare was his nature, and the Empire was the instrument through which he expressed that nature. But this vision suggested something deeper. It told him he was meant to be the one who brought the Republic to ruin, that his destiny was to stand victorious over the ashes of the Jedi Order and forge something new from the crucible of war. When the vision faded and he found himself once more in Korriban's desert, Malgus was changed. He had entered the Valley of the Dark Lords as a newly promoted Sith Lord, powerful and ambitious, but ultimately just another warrior in the Empire's service. He emerged with absolute certainty about his destiny. He would destroy the Republic. He would bring the Jedi Order to its knees, and nothing, not the Sith Emperor, not the Dark Council, not the entire weight of galactic civilization would prevent him from fulfilling this vision. This conviction would drive him for decades. It would fuel his rage in battle, sustain him through injuries that would have killed lesser beings, and ultimately lead to his most audacious and terrible actions. The vision on Korriban set Malgus on a path that would reshape the galaxy, though not in the ways he imagined during that moment of dark revelation. The Battle of Alderaan. In the year 3667 before the Battle of Yavin, 14 years after the war's beginning, Darth Malgus was given command of a major offensive that would test both his tactical abilities and his personal commitment to the vision he had received on Korriban. The target was Alderaan, the beautiful green world of the core that symbolized everything the Republic represented. Its snow-capped mountains, pristine meadows, and peaceful cities made it a symbol of civilization, culture, and the prosperity the Republic promised to protect. To strike at Alderaan was to strike at the Republic's heart, to prove that no world was safe from Sith wrath. Malgus planned the operation with typical directness. The Sith fleet would conduct a feint elsewhere to draw away the main Republic naval forces. Then, with Alderaan's orbital defenses thinned, Malgus would lead a massive assault on the planet's surface. Thousands of assault droids, hundreds of Sith warriors, and countless Imperial soldiers would be deployed to devastate the world. The attack began with a vicious orbital bombardment. Sith warships reduced military installations to rubble and cleared landing zones for the invasion force. Then Malgus descended at the head of his army, and the real destruction began. He led his forces on a march across Alderaan's surface, burning forests and destroying cities in a trek toward the capital. It was total war executed with brutal efficiency. This was not surgical strikes against military targets or attempts to minimize civilian casualties. This was deliberate devastation, meant to break Alderaan's spirit and prove that beauty and civilization meant nothing against overwhelming military force. For a time, the assault succeeded beyond expectations. Alderaan's defenses crumbled before the Sith onslaught. Cities that had stood for centuries burned. Refugees fled in massive numbers, clogging roads and creating chaos that made organized resistance nearly impossible. But the Republic was not defenseless, and Alderaan was too important to abandon without a fight. As Malgus's forces marched through a valley, making their way toward one of Alderaan's major population centers, they were ambushed by members of Havoc's Squad, an elite unit of Republic Special Forces. These soldiers launched a guerrilla counterattack that caught the Sith off guard. But Havoc Squad's real purpose was not to halt the invasion through direct combat. Rather, they were buying time for Republic reinforcements to arrive. And at the head of those reinforcements was someone Malgus had encountered once before, Satele Shan, no longer a Padawan, but now a full Jedi Knight and increasingly recognized as one of the Order's rising stars. Among the Republic soldiers fighting alongside Satele was Jace Malcolm, a decorated officer and skilled combatant who had distinguished himself repeatedly during the war. Malcolm embodied the Republic military at its finest, brave, determined, and utterly committed to defending the Republic regardless of personal cost. When Malcolm encountered Malgus on the battlefield, he did what any Republic soldier would have done. He tried to kill the Sith Lord. He fired several rockets from his launcher directly at Malgus. One struck home, engulfing the Sith in a massive explosion that should have killed any ordinary being. Malgus survived through a combination of force barriers, his armor's protection, and sheer bloody-minded refusal to die. But he did not emerge unscathed. The explosion ravaged his face, burning his flesh and dealing tremendous damage to his respiratory system. Through the smoke and fire, Malgus struck Malcolm down with force lightning and prepared to execute the fallen soldier. Then Satele Shan intervened. The last time they had faced each other, Satele had been a Padawan barely able to hold her own while her master died protecting her. 14 years of training, combat experience, and growing understanding of the Force had transformed her into something far more dangerous. She unleashed a blast of Force energy that killed 3 Sith simultaneously and saved Malcolm's life. What followed was one of the most significant duels of the war. Malgus, already injured from Malcolm's rocket, faced Satele at the height of her power. They exchanged blows with lightsabers moving too fast for non-Force users to track, supplementing physical combat with waves of telekinetic force and blasts of energy. In the midst of their duel, something extraordinary happened. Jace Malcolm, severely wounded but refusing to quit, grabbed a thermal detonator and launched himself at Malgus in a desperate tackle. The grenade exploded at point-blank range, catching both Malcolm and Malgus in the blast. The explosion was catastrophic. Malcolm survived but suffered injuries that left him scarred for life. And Malgus should have died. The damage to his body, particularly his respiratory system, was so severe that any normal being would have perished within moments. His face was a ruin. His lungs were destroyed. He fell, and the Republic forces, seeing their opportunity, pressed their advantage. The Battle of Alderaan turned into a rout. Malgus's forces, their commander down, and Republic reinforcements arriving in strength, were forced to retreat. What had been a devastating Sith victory transformed into humiliating defeat. Alderaan was saved, and the Republic claimed a tremendous propaganda victory. But Darth Malgus was not dead. The Respirator. Malgus survived through the dark side alone, through sheer force of will and rage that refused to let something as insignificant as mortal injury end his existence. Imperial medical teams retrieved him from the battlefield and rushed him to the flagship where Elena awaited, terrified that her lover had finally met his end. The medical diagnosis was grim. Malgus's respiratory system was irreparably damaged. Without mechanical assistance, he would suffocate on his own blood. His face, once merely harsh and imposing, had been transformed into a scarred ruin. He would never breathe normally again. He would never speak without mechanical amplification again. He would carry the marks of Alderaan for the rest of his life. So the Imperial physicians fitted him with a respirator mask. The device was a marvel of Sith technology, a cybernetic system that allowed Malgus to breathe and speak despite lungs that could no longer function properly on their own. The mask covered the lower portion of his face, black metal with distinctive grills that gave him a mechanical, inhuman appearance. It connected to a larger apparatus built into his armor, maintaining pressure and oxygen levels sufficient to keep him alive. With the respirator, Malgus could continue to fight. Without it, he would die in minutes. The mask became his most recognizable feature. Where before he had simply been a large, imposing Sith Lord, now he became something more, a figure of nightmare, part man and part machine, kept alive by dark side fury and Imperial engineering. The respirator's distinctive sound, a mechanical breathing that echoed his every inhalation and exhalation, became as much his signature as his brutal combat style. During his recovery, Elena stayed at his side. She nursed him back to health, tended his wounds, both physical and psychological, and reminded him that he was still Veradun beneath the armor and the mask, that he was still the man she loved, not merely the weapon of the Empire. It was during this recovery period that Malgus had time to reflect on Alderaan and what the defeat meant. He had failed. The vision on Korriban had shown him triumphant, standing over the ruins of the Republic. But on Alderaan, he had been beaten, wounded so severely that only extensive medical intervention had kept him alive. Satele Shan, the Padawan who had escaped his blade years earlier, had fought him to a standstill, and a Republic soldier, not even a Jedi, had inflicted wounds that would mark Malgus forever. But rather than crushing his spirit, the defeat on Alderaan hardened Malgus's resolve. He had been tested and found wanting. The experience had exposed weaknesses in his approach, in his tactics, and perhaps in himself. The dark side demanded that he learn from this failure, that he grow stronger, and that he never suffer such defeat again. So he trained. While his body healed, he refined his techniques, analyzed what had gone wrong, and prepared himself for the next engagement. The Force flowed through him during these sessions with an intensity he had rarely experienced. His rage at the defeat, his pain from the injuries, his burning desire for revenge against those who had dared to wound him, all of it fed into his connection to the dark side. When Darth Malgus finally emerged from recovery and returned to active duty, he was more dangerous than ever before. The respirator was no weakness. It was a reminder, a symbol of what he had survived, of how completely he had embraced the dark side to overcome mortal injury. Every mechanical breath he took was a promise that he would have his revenge, and soon that revenge would come at a scale that would shake the entire galaxy. The sacking of Coruscant. Planning. In the year 3653 before the Battle of Yavin, the Great Galactic War entered its 28th year. Both sides had suffered tremendous casualties, conquered and lost countless worlds, and achieved a bloody stalemate that seemed likely to continue for generations. The Jedi Order, though battered, remained a formidable force for the Republic. The Sith Empire, despite early successes, had failed to achieve the decisive breakthrough that would allow them to crush their ancient enemy. Then the Dark Council, the ruling body of the Sith Empire, devised a plan of breathtaking audacity and deception. They would offer peace. The Empire would contact the Republic Senate and propose negotiations to end the war. They would suggest Alderaan as a neutral site for talks between representatives of both sides. They would dangle before the war-weary Republic the possibility of an honorable peace that would preserve both civilizations. And while the Republic's attention was focused on these peace negotiations, while their leaders debated terms on Alderaan and dared to hope that decades of bloodshed might finally end, the Sith would launch an overwhelming surprise attack on Coruscant itself. The plan called for two main forces. The first, led by the prominent Sith Lord Darth Malgus, would seize control of the Senate building and capture or kill the Republic's Supreme Chancellor. This force represented the bulk of the invasion fleet, the main military presence that would enforce Sith control over the planet once initial resistance was broken. The second force would be much smaller, but have perhaps the most significant objective of the entire operation. This strike team would attack the Jedi Temple directly, the spiritual and tactical heart of the Jedi Order. And leadership of this critical mission went to Darth Malgus. Malgus accepted the assignment with barely contained enthusiasm. This was what his vision on Korriban had shown him. This was his destiny finally arriving. He would personally lead the assault on the Jedi Temple, would cut down the peacekeepers in their own sanctuary, would prove once and for all that the dark side was stronger than the light. In his understanding of the mission, the attack on the temple was merely the opening move. Once the Jedi were broken and the Republic leadership captured or killed, the Empire would conduct an orbital bombardment of Coruscant. They would reduce the Republic capital to ash, would exterminate billions in a display of overwhelming power, and would finally end the Republic's ability to resist. This was not merely military strategy to Malgus. It was philosophical necessity. The Republic represented everything he despised, weakness masquerading as virtue, peace enforced through denial of conflict's fundamental role in the Force, and a Jedi Order that limited access to power based on arbitrary rules about who deserved to learn the Force's secrets. Coruscant's destruction would cleanse the galaxy of these lies. Malgus threw himself into planning the assault with meticulous attention to detail. He studied holographic models of the Jedi Temple thousands of times, memorizing its layout, identifying defensive strong points, determining the most efficient routes through its corridors. He trained with his warriors, drilling them relentlessly until every element of the strike team could perform their roles perfectly. He worked alongside Darth Adrast, a rival Sith Lord who had been assigned as his second-in-command for the operation. Malgus despised Adrast on a personal level. The man represented everything Malgus hated about Sith politics, caring more for position and status than actual combat prowess. But the Dark Council had spoken, and Malgus would not jeopardize the mission through petty rivalry. The plan also required someone to infiltrate Coruscant ahead of the main assault and disable the planet's defense grid. This task fell to Shae Vizsla, a Mandalorian mercenary whose skills made her one of the most dangerous non-Force users in the galaxy. Vizsla would arrive on Coruscant days before the attack, position herself near the temple, and wait for the signal to act. And Malgus, in a gesture that demonstrated both his confidence and his unconventional nature, decided that Elena Daru would accompany him on the mission. This was not merely sentiment, though Malgus certainly wanted his lover at his side for this moment of triumph. Elena had proven herself in combat repeatedly over the years. Her accuracy with twin blasters made her valuable as fire support, and her presence would allow Malgus to fight without worrying about protecting his rear. From a purely tactical perspective, she was an asset, but it was more than tactics. Having Elena with him for this moment, for the fulfillment of his vision, for the culmination of everything he had fought for, felt right in a way that Malgus would not have been able to articulate clearly even if asked. As the date of the peace conference on Alderaan approached, as the Republic leadership gathered to discuss terms with the Sith delegation, Malgus prepared for his finest hour. The attack on the temple. The day arrived with Coruscant's usual bustle, billions of sentients going about their business beneath blue skies and gleaming towers, unaware that their world was about to become a battlefield. The peace negotiations on Alderaan were proceeding according to schedule. Jedi and Sith representatives were actually talking to each other in civil tones, discussing possible frameworks for ending decades of bloodshed. And in Coruscant's orbit, hidden behind sensor-blocking technology and waiting for the signal, hung the greatest invasion fleet the Sith Empire had ever assembled for a single operation. Malgus and Elena arrived on Coruscant's surface hours before the attack was scheduled to begin. They walked through the city openly, two figures among billions, drawing no particular attention. Malgus wore his armor and respirator, but Sith visiting the Republic capital during peace negotiations was not unheard of in these strange times. Elena walked beside him, twin blasters concealed but ready. They used these hours to tour the city one final time before its destruction. Malgus studied the architecture he would soon reduce to rubble, observed the citizens who would soon be dead, and felt nothing but contempt for the civilization the Republic had built. It was beautiful, certainly. The towering buildings, the planned gardens, the integration of natural and constructed elements all spoke to centuries of development and artistic vision. But it was also weak. The people walking past him were soft, grown complacent in centuries of relative peace, trusting that the Republic and its Jedi guardians would protect them. They had forgotten that the galaxy was a place of conflict, that peace was an illusion, and that only the strong deserved to survive. As they walked, Malgus and Elena discussed the Force and the nature of battle and what would come after Coruscant's fall. These were the final moments of relative peace they would share, the last chance for Veradun to speak with Elena before becoming Holy Darth Malgus, instrument of destruction. At one point, Malgus took Elena in his arms and kissed her passionately, there on a public plaza, surrounded by citizens who would be dead within hours. She kissed him back, holding him tightly, and for that moment they were simply two people in love rather than Sith Lord and servant. Then the signal came through Malgus's encrypted comm system. Shae Vizsla had succeeded. Coruscant's defense grid was compromised. The invasion fleet was moving into position. It was time. Malgus and Elena made their way to the Jedi Temple, that massive structure that dominated the skyline and symbolized the Order's presence on Coruscant for thousands of years. They walked up its main steps openly, two figures approaching the temple's entrance, while citizens went about their day, oblivious. The temple guards saw them coming and moved to intercept. Here was a Sith Lord in full armor, accompanied by an armed Twi'lek, approaching the temple entrance during supposed peace negotiations. It was wrong, dangerous, worth investigating at minimum. They never got the chance to raise an alarm. Malgus drew his lightsaber, its crimson blade igniting with that distinctive snap hiss that every Jedi learned to recognize. Before the guards could react, he was among them. His blade moved in brutal arcs, cutting through armor and flesh with equal ease. The guards fell, dying at the threshold of the sanctuary they had sworn to protect. Above them, Shae Vizsla took position on an upper level of the temple, having infiltrated through the disabled security systems. She readied her weapons and waited for what came next. Malgus and Alina entered the temple's main foyer casually, almost leisurely, as if arriving for a diplomatic meeting rather than an assault. The vast chamber echoed with their footsteps, with Malgus's mechanical breathing, with the hum of his lightsaber. Then the Jedi arrived. Over a dozen of them rushed into the foyer, lightsabers igniting in a rainbow of colors, blue and green and yellow, each blade representing a guardian of peace and justice, now forced to defend their home. They surrounded Malgus and Alina, weapons ready, demanding surrender. Among them was Jedi Master Ven Zallo, one of the Order's finest warriors and instructors. Zallo had trained generations of Jedi in the art of lightsaber combat and had fought in dozens of campaigns during the war. His presence spoke to how seriously the Jedi were taking this incursion. They had sent their best. Malgus and Alina stood back to back in the center of the circle, outnumbered but utterly unafraid. This was the moment. This was everything Malgus had trained for, fought for, nearly died for on Alderaan. And then, right on schedule, a Republic shuttle violently crashed through the temple entrance behind Malgus. The massive vessel smashed through ancient stone columns and slammed to rest in the foyer, its boarding ramp already lowering. But this was no Republic ship anymore. The Sith had captured and repurposed it, and now it disgorged its true cargo. Over 20 Sith warriors poured out of the shuttle, led by Darth Adras. Their lightsabers ignited in a chorus of crimson blades, and they charged the Jedi Knights with ferocious battle cries. The sacking of Coruscant had begun, the battle in the temple. What followed was chaos given form. The temple's main foyer, a place of meditation and contemplation, became a killing ground. Lightsabers clashed with the sound of thundercrack. Force lightning arced through the air, deflected by Jedi barriers or finding its mark and leaving charred corpses in its wake. Warriors on both sides fell, bodies piling up as the battle raged. Shae Vizsla moved through the upper levels with her jetpack, mowing down temple guards with her blaster and flamethrower, preventing reinforcements from reaching the main battle. Rockets streaked through the air, exploding against stone columns and dropping parts of the ceiling onto combatants below. Alina took cover behind a fallen pillar and provided covering fire, her twin blasters spitting death at any Jedi who tried to approach Malgus from behind. She moved with practiced efficiency, shifting position constantly, never staying in one place long enough for the Jedi to target her effectively, and Malgus was perfection. He moved through the Jedi like a force of nature, his red blade cutting through defenses that had taken years to build. He killed a Jedi Knight with a single thrust, then turned and used the Force to hurl another into a stone wall with such force that bones shattered on impact. Force lightning streamed from his fingertips, killing 2 more Jedi simultaneously. His fighting style was a thing of terrible beauty. He combined Form V's brutal power strikes with acrobatic movements that seemed impossible for someone of his size. One moment, he was on the ground, overwhelming a Jedi with pure strength. The next, he was airborne, his leap carrying him across the foyer to land among a group of temple guards who died before they realized he was there. But through all the chaos, Malgus's attention kept returning to one figure, Ven Zallo. The Jedi Master was fighting Adros and several other Sith simultaneously, and despite the odds, he was winning. Zallo's mastery of lightsaber combat was evident in every movement. He wove between attacks that should have killed him, his blade a blur of blue light that turned aside crimson strikes and found gaps in Sith defenses. When Zallo used the Force to slam Alina into a fallen column, temporarily taking her out of the fight, Malgus's focus narrowed to a single point. Rage surged through him, not the wild, uncontrolled fury of an amateur, but the cold, channeled wrath of a Sith master who had turned emotion into weapon. He charged toward Zallo, his blade raised, and the Jedi Master turned to meet him. Their duel was the centerpiece of the larger battle, two warriors at the height of their powers testing each other with every technique they knew. Zallo's form was textbook perfect, each movement economical and precise. Malgus's style was raw power, given purpose, overwhelming strength channeled through flawless technique. They fought through the burning foyer, their blades clashing hundreds of times in mere seconds. Zallo's mastery kept him alive through exchanges that should have killed him. Malgus's relentless assault gave Zallo no time to use the Force against him, no opportunity to do anything but defend. But defense alone was not enough. Malgus feinted high, then struck low. Zallo blocked, but was forced to give ground. Malgus pressed forward, his blade moving in combinations designed to break through Zallo's guard. The Jedi Master countered, his own blade seeking openings in Malgus's defenses. Then Malgus did something unexpected. He caught Zallo's blade with his own in a blade lock, using his superior size and strength to force the Jedi back. As they strained against each other, Malgus released one hand from his lightsaber hilt and unleashed a point-blank blast of Force lightning. Zallo's only defense was to disengage, to throw himself backward and roll away from the lightning. But this broke his defensive stance, left him momentarily vulnerable. And Malgus, who had been waiting for exactly this opening, drove forward with a thrust that caught Ven Zallo through the heart. The Jedi Master's eyes widened in shock. His lightsaber fell from nerveless fingers, and Darth Malgus withdrew his blade, watching with cold satisfaction as one of the Jedi Order's finest warriors collapsed dead at his feet. Around them, the battle was winding down. Most of the Jedi in the foyer were dead or dying. Temple guards had been slaughtered by Shae Vizsla's assault from above. The few surviving Jedi had retreated deeper into the temple, and Sith warriors were already pursuing them through the corridors. Malgus stood among the corpses and the burning wreckage, his armor scorched, his respirator filtering the smoke and ash that filled the air. He turned slowly, surveying the destruction with grim satisfaction. The Jedi Temple, symbol of the Order's power, was burning. Its defenders were dead or scattered, and Darth Malgus had personally led the assault that brought it down. He retrieved Alina, who had recovered from Zallo's Force push and was already back on her feet, and together they walked through the temple, overseeing the consolidation of Sith control. Surviving Jedi were hunted down and killed, the temple archives were ransacked for knowledge. The Republic's spiritual heart was violated in every way the Sith could devise, and Malgus, basking in his triumph, waited for the next phase of the operation, the orbital bombardment that would reduce Coruscant to ash and finally bring the Republic to its knees. He waited for the sky to burn, but the order never came. Hours passed. The Sith had complete control of the temple. Darth Angril's forces had seized the Senate building and captured or killed the Republic leadership. The invasion had succeeded beyond all expectations. Coruscant, the Republic capital, was in Sith hands. So why weren't the bombardment ships opening fire? Malgus contacted the command ship, demanding to know why the orbital assault had not begun. What he learned shook him to his core. There would be no bombardment. The Dark Council had never intended to destroy Coruscant. The entire attack was not a prelude to the Republic's annihilation, but rather a bargaining chip in the peace negotiations. The Sith planned to hold Coruscant hostage, to force the Republic to sign a treaty that heavily favored the Empire, and then withdraw. To Malgus, this was incomprehensible. They had achieved what should have been impossible. They had captured the Republic capital, broken the Jedi in their own temple, demonstrated absolute military superiority. Victory was within their grasp. The vision he had received on Korriban, the galaxy burning and the Republic destroyed, was finally within reach, and the Dark Council planned to throw it away for political advantage. Malgus rushed to the Senate building where Darth Angril had set up his command post in the captured Supreme Chancellor's office. He burst in, his fury barely contained, and demanded an explanation. What followed was one of the most significant confrontations of Malgus's career, though few witnesses survived to record it. Angril, a politician as much as a warrior, explained the situation with the cold logic of realpolitik. The Empire could not hold Coruscant indefinitely. The Republic still had significant military forces in the field. If the Sith destroyed the capital, they would unite the entire galaxy against the Empire in a war of vengeance that would cost more than they could afford. But if they held Coruscant hostage during negotiations, they could extract massive concessions, territory, resources, recognition of the Empire's legitimacy, everything they needed to consolidate power and prepare for the next phase of conflict. Malgus heard the words, but could not accept the reasoning. This was not how war was meant to be fought. Victory was not a bargaining chip to be traded away for political advantage. The strong conquered, the weak submitted or died. There was no middle ground, no compromise with failure. And then Darth Adras, who had beaten Malgus to this meeting and spent the intervening time poisoning Angril against him, revealed that he had ordered Elena sent to a civilian hospital on Coruscant's surface, rather than being treated aboard the Imperial medical ship as Malgus had requested. Adras called Elena a mongrel, dismissed her value, implied that Malgus's relationship with her was a weakness that compromised his judgment. The insult, combined with everything else, pushed Malgus past the breaking point. He drew his lightsaber and crossed blades with Adras right there in the Chancellor's office. Only Angril's intervention prevented them from killing each other, but the damage was done. Malgus saw clearly now how his fellow Sith viewed him, not as the war leader whose vision would reshape the galaxy, but as an oddity, an unorthodox warrior whose relationship with an alien slave marked him as somehow compromised. They respected his combat prowess while disdaining everything that made him who he was. And they had betrayed everything the attack on Coruscant should have represented, transforming victory into mere leverage in endless negotiations. Malgus left the Senate building in a state of cold fury that would not dissipate for years. The Treaty of Coruscant was signed. The Sith forces withdrew from the capital. The Republic survived, and Darth Malgus was forced to acknowledge that while he had fulfilled the Vision's promise of attacking the Temple, he had failed to achieve the Vision's ultimate goal of destroying the Republic. This failure, this betrayal by his own side, would reshape Malgus's worldview fundamentally. He began to question not just the Dark Council's decisions, but the entire structure of the Sith Empire. If the Empire's leaders were too weak or too short-sighted to seize total victory when it was offered, then perhaps the Empire itself needed to be swept away and replaced with something stronger. These thoughts were treasonous, of course, dangerous even to contemplate, but Malgus was a Sith, and the dark side demanded honesty about one's ambitions, even when those ambitions threatened to tear down institutions that had endured for centuries. For now, though, he had another matter to address, one that would require him to make the most difficult decision of his entire life: the death of love. The days following the sacking of Coruscant were strange for Darth Malgus. The Empire had achieved an improbable military victory, but squandered it for political gain. The treaty had been signed, heavily favoring the Sith, but leaving the Republic intact. Imperial forces occupied Coruscant, not as conquerors, but as an occupying presence during the transition period mandated by the treaty. And Malgus, stationed on Coruscant to maintain orbital security, found himself with time to think about things he had spent years avoiding. Elena had recovered from her injuries sustained during the Temple assault. The civilian hospital where Adras had sent her was actually well equipped, and she healed without complications. But the incident had made something clear to both Malgus and his political rivals. Everyone knew about their relationship now. The secret was out. And in an empire that despised alien races and forbade such unions, this knowledge was a weapon that could be used against him. During one of their private moments, Malgus and Elena had an argument not about the attack or the treaty, but about their future together. Elena had grown weary of constant warfare, of always being in danger of the endless cycle of violence that defined Malgus's existence. She loved him, genuinely, but she could no longer deny that loving a Sith Lord meant accepting a life where death could come at any moment. Malgus was struck by her beauty in that moment, by her courage in speaking truth to someone who could kill her with a thought. He kissed her passionately, and for a brief time they simply held each other, two people caught in a galaxy that had no place for the love they shared. But shortly after this encounter, something occurred that would force Malgus to confront the fundamental question he had been avoiding. Was Elena a strength or a weakness? A Jedi Knight named Aaron Lanier, former apprentice of Vin Zallo, had come to Coruscant seeking revenge against the Sith Lord who had killed her master. Through investigation and combat encounters, Aaron eventually tracked down Elena at a spaceport, catching the Twi'lek when she was lone and vulnerable. Aaron defeated Elena easily. The Twi'lek was skilled with blasters, but no match for a Jedi Knight in close combat. With Elena disarmed and helpless, Aaron prepared to kill her as revenge for Zalo's death. She raised her lightsaber, ready to strike the killing blow. But then Aaron hesitated. She looked at Alina, really looked at her, and saw not a Sith warrior, but a frightened woman who clearly loved someone capable of terrible cruelty. Aaron saw the scars, both physical and psychological, that marked Alina as someone who had suffered. And Aaron realized that killing her would accomplish nothing meaningful, would merely add one more corpse to the mountain of bodies the war had already produced. So Aaron Lanier, Jedi Knight and Master's former apprentice, did something extraordinary. She spared Alina's life. She lowered her weapon, knocked the Twi'lek unconscious to prevent her from raising an alarm, and left to continue her hunt for Malgus elsewhere. When Malgus learned what had happened, when he arrived at the spaceport expecting combat and found only his unconscious lover, he was forced to acknowledge a truth he had denied for years. Alina was his weakness, not because she made him weaker as a warrior, not because their relationship somehow diminished his connection to the dark side, but because she gave his enemies leverage over him. His rivals like Adras could use her against him politically. His foes like Aaron could use her as bait or a bargaining chip. Every moment he spent worrying about her safety was a moment when he was not focused entirely on victory. And then there was what had happened with Aaron. When Malgus eventually confronted the Jedi Knight, he defeated her in combat. His skills were simply superior to hers. His command of the dark side too powerful for her to overcome. He had her at his mercy, could have killed her and avenged the humiliation of having his lover captured. But he didn't. He let Aaron go, alive and free, because she had shown mercy to Alina. The Sith philosophy he had embraced demanded that he show no mercy, that he eliminate enemies whenever possible, that compassion was weakness. Yet Malgus had violated that philosophy because of his love for the Twi'lek woman. This was the moment when Darth Malgus understood what he had to do. The dark side was clear on this point. Attachments were chains. Love was vulnerability. To achieve his destiny, to fulfill the vision he had seen on Korriban, he needed to be free of all constraints on his power. He waited until Alina regained consciousness and recovered enough to understand what was happening. Then, in a moment that would haunt him for years, Malgus told her something he had never said before, something he had kept buried beneath layers of Sith conditioning and warrior's pride. He told her that he loved her. Alina's face lit up with joy at hearing the words she had waited years for him to speak. She smiled, tears forming in her eyes, and reached out to embrace him. And Darth Malgus activated his lightsaber and drove it through her heart. The strike was quick and clean. Alina died instantly, without pain, without time to realize what had happened. One moment she was reaching for the man she loved. The next, she was falling, the light fading from her eyes, a corpse before she hit the ground. Malgus stood over her body, lightsaber still ignited, and felt nothing. The dark side demanded sacrifice, and he had sacrificed the only thing in the galaxy he had allowed himself to care about. He had proven his commitment to power over attachment, to strength over weakness. But in the weeks and months that followed, as Malgus continued his duties and fought his battles, he discovered something unexpected. The pain of Alina's death, the memory of her smile as she reached for him, the knowledge of what he had done these things did not fade. they did not diminish his connection to the dark side. They fueled it. Every time he fought, he channeled the pain of that moment. Every time he unleashed force lightning or cut down an enemy, he was fueled partially by rage at what the galaxy had forced him to become. The dark side fed on suffering, and Malgus had created an eternal wellspring of suffering within himself by killing the only person who had known him as Veridun rather than as Darth Malgus. In a twisted way, Elena's death made him stronger, not because she had been a weakness, but because murdering her had created a wound in his psyche that would never heal, a source of pain he could draw upon forever. This was the price of power. This was what the dark side demanded, and Darth Malgus paid it willingly, even though part of him would regret it until the day he died. The Cold War era following the Treaty of Coruscant, the galaxy entered a period known as the Cold War. Open hostilities between the Empire and the Republic largely ceased, though proxy conflicts and covert operations continued on worlds throughout the Outer Rim and in contested territories. The peace was fragile, maintained more by mutual exhaustion than genuine reconciliation, and everyone understood that it could not last forever. During this period, Darth Malgus made a decision that surprised many of his fellow Sith. Rather than involving himself in the power struggles among the Dark Council members, as most ambitious Sith would, rather than scheming for position and status, Malgus essentially removed himself from Imperial politics entirely. He requested and received permission to lead military expeditions into the unknown regions, the vast, unexplored territories beyond the galaxy's known boundaries where the Sith Empire had rebuilt its strength during its long exile, while other Sith Lords fought each other for seats on the Dark Council and control over the Empire's industrial base. Malgus took his forces into the darkness and expanded Imperial territory into regions that had never seen civilization. This was not modesty or lack of ambition. Malgus simply had no interest in the political games that obsessed his peers. He was a warrior, pure and simple. Combat was what gave his life meaning. The endless scheming, the backstabbing, the careful management of alliances and rivalries that characterized Dark Council politics, all of it struck Malgus as beneath him. So he went where the fighting was pure, where victory or defeat was measured in conquered systems rather than political leverage, where he could serve the Empire through conquest rather than conversation. During these expeditions, Malgus developed a reputation that set him apart from typical Sith commanders. He hired mercenaries from species that other Imperials considered untrustworthy or inferior. He learned dozens of alien languages, something almost unheard of for a Sith Lord. He built alliances with non-human groups based on mutual respect for martial prowess, rather than forcing them into submission through fear. This unorthodox approach yielded results. Systems that might have resisted Imperial conquest for years joined willingly when Malgus offered them partnership based on strength rather than subjugation. Alien warriors who would have fought to the death against a typical Sith invasion force instead served in Malgus's armies, honored to fight alongside a commander who valued their capabilities. His fellow Sith began to whisper that Malgus had strange ideas, that his time away from Imperial centers of power had given him notions that challenged fundamental assumptions about how the Empire should function. They were not wrong. Malgus had started to question the Empire's policies on alien species. He had seen firsthand that strength and capability were not limited to humans or Sith purebloods. The Mandalorians he worked with were extraordinary warriors. The various alien cultures he encountered in the unknown regions possessed unique skills and perspectives that could benefit the Empire. Yet, Imperial doctrine treated all non-humans as inferior, limiting them to menial roles or outright slavery. This struck Malgus as short-sighted and wasteful. The Empire was limiting its own potential through prejudices that had no basis in observable reality. These were dangerous thoughts, revolutionary thoughts, the kind of thoughts that got ambitious Sith marked as potential traitors. But Malgus was not yet ready to act on them. For now, he simply noted the inefficiency and continued his campaigns, building a personal military force that was unusually diverse in composition and unusually loyal to him personally. The Cold War also saw Malgus involved in various operations that would have long-term consequences. He ordered the investigation of an ancient Sith artifact known as the Hammer Station, recognizing its strategic value. He participated in operations to secure forbidden Sith knowledge, understanding that information was power and that lost techniques might prove valuable in future conflicts. Most significantly, he led the Imperial assault on the Foundry, an ancient facility built by the near-extinct Rakata species. The Foundry was controlled by someone Malgus considered one of the most dangerous beings in the galaxy, Revan, the former Jedi Knight, turned Sith Lord who had been captured and imprisoned by the Sith Emperor for centuries. Revan had escaped and was using the Foundry to build an army of droids capable of systematically exterminating every living member of the Sith species. His plan was genocidal in scope to prevent future Sith empires by eliminating the genetic and cultural foundations upon which such empires were built. Malgus led the strike team that infiltrated the Foundry and defeated Revan. This was not merely a military victory, but an ideological one. Revan represented a middle path between Jedi and Sith, having walked both roads and found wisdom in neither. His defeat preserved the purity of both light and dark, ensuring that the conflict between them would continue without compromise. For Malgus, who believed that conflict was the Force's essential nature, preserving that binary opposition was crucial. A galaxy where everyone accepted Revan's middle path would stagnate. Only through the eternal struggle between absolute light and absolute darkness could strength emerge. The Foundry's capture also gave Malgus access to incredible technology. The facility could mass-produce droids and weapons at a rate far beyond conventional manufacturing. This knowledge would prove useful in years to come, though at the time, Malgus simply saw it as another strategic asset for the Empire. But while Malgus fought in the unknown regions and secured ancient facilities, events were unfolding in the wider galaxy that would soon demand his attention. The fragile peace was crumbling. Tensions between Empire and Republic were escalating, and on the hidden Sith capital of Dromund Kaas, something extraordinary and terrible was about to occur. The Sith Emperor, the immortal being who had ruled the Empire for over 1,000 years, was about to die. The voice falls silent. The Sith Emperor, known variously as Vitiate, Valkorion, and a dozen other names accumulated across centuries, was not a normal being. He had achieved a form of immortality through the most horrific means imaginable, draining the life force of an entire planet to sustain himself. He was more than powerful. He was power made manifest, so far beyond typical Sith Lords that comparing him to them was like comparing a star to a candle. But immortality was not the same as invincibility, and the Emperor, in his arrogance, had made a critical error. He had created servants known as the Children of the Emperor, force-sensitive beings whose wills he could dominate completely, using them as puppets to enact his will throughout the galaxy. These children were extensions of himself, their minds linked to his through the Force. One of these children, after decades of service, managed something unprecedented. They broke free of the Emperor's control, and then, guided by Jedi and Republic agents, this child tracked down one of the Emperor's voices, the bodies he occupied when he wanted to interact with the physical world, and killed it. The Emperor's consciousness retreated into the dark side, wounded and diminished. But throughout the Empire, the news spread that the Emperor was dead. His physical form had been destroyed. His control over his servants was broken. The ruler, who had maintained iron-fisted control over the Sith for over a millennium, was gone. For most Sith, this was a disaster. The Empire had been built around absolute loyalty to the Emperor. Without him, the Dark Council's authority was uncertain. Internal power struggles were inevitable. But for Darth Malgus, this was opportunity. He had long believed that the Emperor's policies had held the Empire back. The refusal to destroy the Republic when the chance presented itself. The maintenance of ancient prejudices that weakened the Empire's military potential. The endless political maneuvering among Dark Council members who cared more for personal power than imperial strength. If the Emperor was truly gone, if the old order was crumbling, then perhaps it was time for something new, something stronger. An empire rebuilt according to principles of pure meritocracy, where strength was rewarded regardless of species or origin, where the weak were culled not through backstabbing, but through honest combat, where victory over the Republic was pursued with single-minded determination rather than compromised for political advantage. These thoughts had been building in Malgus for years, since the betrayal at Coruscant, since Alina's death, since his time in the unknown regions had shown him alternative ways of building power. Now, with the Emperor gone, the opportunity to act was upon him. But Malgus was not foolish. Open rebellion would simply result in every remaining Sith Lord uniting to crush him. He needed a more subtle approach. He needed to position himself as a loyal servant of the Empire while simultaneously building the foundations for something entirely different. He needed a crisis he could use. The crisis came in the form of Darth Arho, a hawkish member of the Dark Council who decided to launch an invasion of the remote ice world of Ilum. The planet was important primarily for its extensive deposits of Adagan crystals, the materials used in lightsaber construction. Arho's plan was to secure these crystals to create an invincible stealth armada that would give the Empire decisive advantage over the Republic. From the outside, Malgus appeared to support the invasion. He participated in strategy meetings, offered advice, and commanded forces when assigned. But in reality, he was playing a far more complex game. Secretly, Malgus was feeding information to the Republic. He was ensuring that they knew about Arho's invasion and could mount an effective defense. His goal was not to protect the Republic, but to orchestrate Arho's failure. A successful invasion would strengthen a rival's position on the Dark Council. A failed invasion would create a power vacuum that Malgus could exploit. The Battle of Ilum unfolded exactly as Malgus had planned. Republic forces, warned of the invasion and reinforced in advance, fought Arho's troops to a standstill. Malgus even covertly assisted in the rescue of Supreme Commander Rands, the Republic's top military officer, ensuring that the Republic's leadership would survive to continue the war. When Arho's invasion collapsed, the Dark Council needed someone to blame. Malgus stepped forward and offered evidence of Arho's incompetence, his overreach, his failure to account for Republic capabilities. The Council, desperate to stabilize the situation, accepted Malgus's assessment. Darth Arho was removed from the Dark Council in disgrace, and Darth Malgus, the loyal servant who had tried to make the operation work despite his superior's failings, was promoted to fill the vacancy. This gave Malgus exactly what he needed: a seat on the Dark Council, command over the sphere of military offense, and most importantly, access to the resources and authority necessary to launch his true plan. The new Empire Malgus used his position on the Dark Council to methodically accumulate everything he would need for rebellion. He claimed control of Arho's remaining forces. He secured access to the Foundry and began producing a droid army in secret. He continued building alliances with alien factions throughout the unknown regions, promising them a place in a new order where strength mattered more than species. All the while, he maintained his facade of loyalty. He attended Dark Council meetings. He offered military counsel. He executed the missions assigned to him with his usual brutal efficiency. To outside observers, he was simply doing his job, serving the Empire as he always had. But internally, Malgus was planning revolution on a scale the galaxy had not seen in centuries. His opportunity came when he was tasked with securing more Adagan crystals from Ilum, the same mission that had destroyed Arho, now assigned to Malgus as a test of his loyalty and capability. The Dark Council wanted those crystals for the stealth fleet. They saw it as a strategic asset that would give the Empire advantage in the continuing cold conflict with the Republic. Malgus saw it as the cornerstone of something far greater. He led his forces to Ilum personally, commanding the operation with the same attention to detail that had made him successful throughout his career. His armies landed on the frozen world. His workers began harvesting the crystals from Ilum's famous crystal caves. Everything proceeded according to schedule. And then, once he had secured the crystals and confirmed that his droid army from the Foundry was ready, once he had positioned his forces exactly where he needed them, Darth Malgus did something that shocked both the Empire and the Republic. He declared himself Emperor of a new empire. Standing aboard his secret space station hidden in the unknown regions, surrounded by the forces he had built through years of careful preparation, Malgus made a speech that was broadcast throughout both Imperial and Republic space. His words were direct, uncompromising, and revolutionary. He denounced the old empire as weak, corrupted by endless infighting, and held back by ancient prejudices that had no place in a modern military state. He condemned the Dark Council as self-serving politicians who cared more about their own power than imperial victory. He called out the anti-alien policies as strategically foolish, limiting the Empire's strength by excluding capable warriors based on arbitrary discrimination. His new empire, he proclaimed, would be different. It would be built on principles of pure meritocracy. Any being, regardless of species or origin, could rise as high as their strength and skill would take them. There would be no backstabbing, no political maneuvering, no tolerance for those who sought position through intrigue rather than proven capability. The new empire would pursue one goal with absolute determination: the complete destruction of the Republic. No more treaties, no more negotiations, no more compromises that preserve the enemy for political advantage. Just total war until one side or the other was utterly annihilated. And most radical of all, Malgus declared that he had broken his chains. He would serve no master, not the dead emperor, not the Dark Council, not even the traditional hierarchies of the Sith Order. He had achieved what every Sith claimed to seek, but few ever obtained: true freedom. "I have done what so many Sith pretend to do but never really achieve," he proclaimed. "I have broken my chains. I will never again have a master. I will never let another rule over me. I will never return to the Empire." The speech was extraordinary, not just for its content, but for its absolute certainty. Malgus spoke with the conviction of someone who knew he was right, who had thought through every aspect of his philosophy and found it sound. He was not mad. He was not deluded. He simply believed with every fiber of his being that both the Empire and the Republic needed to be swept away and rebuilt according to principles that actually made sense. To enforce his declaration, Malgus revealed his military strength. The droid army from the Foundry, thousands of units ready for immediate deployment. The stealth fleet he had built using the Adagan crystals from Ilum. The alien factions that had pledged their loyalty to him personally. The Sith Lords, who agreed with his vision and had defected to join his cause. His most prominent supporter was Darth Revan, a capable Sith Lord who became one of Malgus's closest allies. But Revan was merely the most visible of many who believed Malgus's new empire represented the Sith's best chance for true dominance. Malgus sent Revan to Ilum to consolidate control of the crystal deposits and prepare for the inevitable Republic and Imperial response. His plan was straightforward: use Ilum as bait to draw forces from both sides, then crush them with his superior technology and tactics. Each victory would bring more adherents to his cause. Each defeat inflicted on his enemies would prove the strength of his philosophy. For a brief moment, it seemed possible that Malgus might succeed. His forces were formidable, his strategy was sound, and crucially, his message resonated with many in the Empire who were tired of the Dark Council's endless politicking and failure to achieve decisive victory. But Malgus had made a critical error in his calculations. He had assumed that the Empire and Republic, locked in their generational conflict, would not be able to cooperate against a common threat. He had believed that both sides would see his new empire as just another faction to be dealt with separately. He was wrong. The threat Malgus represented was so great that it forced his enemies to do something unprecedented. They worked together. Republic and Imperial forces, Jedi and Sith Lords who had been trying to kill each other just days earlier, united against Malgus's rebellion. His revolution had given them common cause. The combined forces attacked Ilum first, defeating Darth Revan and securing a stealth command ship from Malgus's fleet. Then they used that captured ship to infiltrate Malgus's hidden space station, the nerve center of his entire operation. Malgus had prepared for attack, certainly. His station was heavily defended, filled with droids and Sith warriors loyal to his cause. The infiltration team would have to fight through deck after deck of resistance, including specially modified versions of the infamous HK-47 assassin droids. But these were the best warriors from both sides, the Empire's most elite Sith, the Republic's finest Jedi, soldiers and agents who had survived the Great Galactic War and countless battles since. They were not easily stopped. The infiltration team fought their way through Malgus's defenses, leaving destruction in their wake. They overcame every obstacle he placed before them, and eventually they reached his throne room aboard the space station, where Darth Malgus waited to face them personally. The false emperor, the throne room, was a statement of Malgus's philosophy, brutal efficiency, with no decoration beyond what served a purpose. The throne itself was positioned on a raised platform, with a bridge connecting it to the rest of the station. If that bridge was destroyed, anyone on the throne platform would be trapped, cut off from escape. This was intentional. Malgus had designed the room so that he could not run, could not retreat. Victory or death, with no middle ground. When the strike team entered, Malgus stood from his throne and faced them. He knew most of them, either directly or by reputation. Some he had fought before, others he had fought alongside during the war before his rebellion. Now they were all united against him. He was not surprised. This was how the Sith worked. This was how the galaxy worked. The strong survived by eliminating threats. He had become a threat, and so they had come to eliminate him. Good. He would not have had it any other way. The battle was ferocious. Malgus wielded his distinctive lightsaber with the same brutal efficiency that had made him legendary. He used the Force with devastating effect, lightning arcing through the air, telekinetic blasts, hurling opponents against walls, a Force scream that shattered equipment and stunned even the most prepared defenders. He killed some of the strike team members outright. Others he severely wounded. But there were too many of them, and they were too skilled. More importantly, they had learned from his fighting style during previous encounters. They knew his patterns, his preferences, his likely responses to various situations, and they had specifically prepared for this confrontation. As the battle wore on, Malgus found himself being forced back, step by step, toward the edge of the throne platform. He fought with everything he had, drawing on reserves of power that would have killed most beings, channeling his rage and pain and absolute determination into attacks that should have overwhelmed any defense. But it was not enough. When Malgus's health finally failed, when his body reached its limits, he began channeling Force lightning continuously, becoming invulnerable to damage, but also unable to move from his position. This was his last stand, a final desperate attempt to destroy his enemies even as they destroyed him. The strike team had anticipated even this. They attacked in coordinated fashion, some engaging him directly while others prepared the final counter. And then, working together, they used their combined Force powers to blast Malgus backward. He flew off the platform and into the reactor shaft that led to the heart of the space station. The fall would have killed any normal being, but Darth Malgus was no normal being, and the dark side had sustained him through injuries that should have been fatal many times before. Even as he fell into darkness, even as his station began its self-destruct sequence around him, Malgus refused to accept defeat. He had been right about the Empire's weakness. He had been right about the need for reform. He had been right that strength should be rewarded regardless of origin. The galaxy had simply proven unready for his vision, too entrenched in old ways, too afraid of change, too weak to accept the harsh truths he had tried to teach. His last conscious thought as he fell was not regret, but determination. This was not over. The galaxy had not heard the last of Darth Malgus. The onslaught returns. For years, Darth Malgus was assumed dead. The space station had been destroyed. No one could survive falling into a reactor shaft during a catastrophic explosion. Both the Empire and the Republic moved on, dealing with other crises, other wars, other threats. The new Empire was dismissed as a failed rebellion, a cautionary tale about the dangers of challenging established order. Grand Moff Ilian Regus coined the term the False Emperor to describe Malgus, and the name stuck. To history, Malgus became not a revolutionary, but a pretender, someone who had aspired to greatness, but achieved only failure. But in the shadows, far from civilized space, something was moving, or rather, someone was being moved. Darth Malgus had not died in the fall. Barely alive, his body broken beyond recognition, he had been discovered by agents of the Empire. But not just any agents. These served Empress Asina or Emperor Valron, depending on the outcome of earlier conflicts, the new ruler who had consolidated power after the Eternal Empire crisis and was rebuilding Sith strength. The decision was made to preserve Malgus rather than execute him. His knowledge, his tactical brilliance, his sheer capability as a warrior, all of these were too valuable to simply waste out of spite for his past rebellion. So they began the process of rebuilding him. It was an extraordinarily complex procedure. His body required extensive cybernetic reconstruction. His mind, damaged by the trauma and by years in what was essentially a coma, needed to be restored. And most challenging of all, the Empire needed to ensure that when Malgus awoke, he would serve loyally, rather than immediately resuming his rebellion. They used every tool at their disposal, cybernetic implants that could supposedly control his actions, mental conditioning that reinforced loyalty to the throne, implanted commands that would activate in specific circumstances. They essentially tried to reprogram one of the most powerful Sith Lords in history to serve as a weapon of the Empire. When Darth Malgus finally awoke, the galaxy had changed dramatically. The Eternal Empire of Zakul had risen and fallen. New conflicts had erupted. The Republic and the Sith Empire had formed an alliance called the Eternal Alliance to fight common threats. And both sides needed every powerful Force user they could field. Malgus was given a specific role, the Wrath of the Empress Emperor, serving as the ruler's personal enforcer and champion. It was a position of tremendous honor and authority. The Wrath answered only to the throne and could command resources throughout the Empire. To outside observers, it seemed like Malgus's rehabilitation was complete. He served loyally on missions throughout Imperial space and beyond. He fought the Empire's enemies with his characteristic brutality and efficiency. He appeared to have accepted his place in the hierarchy and abandoned his revolutionary aspirations. But appearances can be deceiving, especially where Sith are concerned. The cybernetic controls over Malgus's actions were not as absolute as his masters believed. The mental conditioning had not erased his beliefs, merely suppressed them temporarily, And most importantly, the man they had attempted to reprogram was Darth Malgus, someone who had spent decades developing the willpower to break chains. During an operation on Dantooine, sent to investigate suspicious activities by agents of a mysterious group called the Hidden Chain, Malgus made his move. He broke free of the control systems, he rejected the commands implanted in his mind, and he went rogue for the second time, determined to pursue his own agenda without interference from the Empire or any other authority. But this time, his goals were different. Malgus had learned from his previous failure. He understood now that simply declaring a new empire and expecting the galaxy to follow was insufficient. He needed something more, something that would give him power beyond what the Empire or Republic could match. He needed the secrets of Darth Nul, the hunt for forbidden knowledge. Darth Nul was a mystery wrapped in enigma, a Sith Lord from ancient times whose records had been systematically purged from Imperial archives. Most Sith had never heard the name. Those who had knew only rumors and fragments, whispers of someone who had discovered techniques so dangerous that the Sith Emperor himself had ordered all knowledge of them destroyed. But forbidden knowledge has a way of surviving. And Malgus, with his extensive experience in the unknown regions and his access to Sith secrets during his time on the Dark Council, had picked up hints about where to look. His investigation led him to Dantooine, where he discovered a Jedi enclave containing relics connected to Nul. There, in hidden chambers beneath the ruins, Malgus found the first pieces of a puzzle that would consume him for years. Evidence of Nul's work creating the children of the Emperor, the Force-sensitive beings whose minds could be dominated and controlled by a sufficiently powerful Sith. This was what had given the Emperor his seemingly omniscient knowledge of events throughout the galaxy. This was how he had maintained control over an empire spanning hundreds of systems. The children were his eyes, his ears, his hands, extensions of his will distributed throughout civilized space. But Nul's techniques went further. The surviving fragments suggested she had discovered ways to manipulate the Force itself at a fundamental level, to create connections between minds that persisted across any distance, to transform ordinary Force sensitives into conduits for tremendous power. If Malgus could master these techniques, if he could understand and replicate what Nul had achieved, he would possess power beyond anything the galaxy had seen since the Emperor himself. He could build his own network of controlled servants. He could enhance his own abilities beyond natural limits. He could finally achieve the vision that had driven him since Korriban. So Malgus began a systematic search for every scrap of information about Darth Nul that remained in the galaxy. His investigation took him to Alum, a desolate world where Nul had established one of her hidden temples. In that ancient structure, surrounded by artifacts and records that had survived millennia, Malgus discovered more of Nul's techniques, and he found a holocron, a repository of Sith knowledge that contained secrets even more profound than those he had expected. But he was not alone in his search. The Eternal Alliance, that coalition of Republic and Imperial forces that had formed to fight the Eternal Empire, had become aware of Nul's existence and the danger her knowledge represented. They sent their best operatives, the Alliance commander who had already stopped multiple galactic threats, to track Malgus down and prevent him from obtaining the forbidden knowledge. The confrontation on Elom was inevitable. Malgus had prepared the temple carefully, setting traps powered by the dark side, positioning defenses that would slow any pursuers. But the Alliance commander had proven resourceful many times before, and they were not easily deterred. When they finally reached Malgus in the heart of Nul's temple, he was ready for them. He fought with the power of someone who had nothing to lose, channeling decades of experience and rage into an assault that should have overwhelmed any defense. But the Alliance commander had defeated him once before aboard his space station. They knew his style, his patterns, his preferences, and crucially, they were not alone. Lana Benico and Tau Edair, two powerful Force users in their own right, fought alongside the commander. The battle was ferocious but brief. 3 against 1, with Malgus already weakened from his escape from Imperial control and his investigations draining him, the outcome was never truly in doubt. When the dust settled, Darth Malgus was defeated once more, but this time they did not kill him. The Alliance needed information about Nul and the Hidden Chain, the mysterious organization that seemed to be following in Nul's footsteps. Dead, Malgus was useless. Alive and imprisoned, he could be interrogated, his knowledge extracted through careful questioning. So they designed a special prison just for him. The Prison and the Truth. The prison was a masterwork of Force-sensitive engineering. A throne sat isolated on a platform, surrounded by a chasm on all sides, accessible only by carefully controlled bridges. A containment field, powered by both technology and Force energy, surrounded the throne and prevented anyone trapped within from using Force powers to escape. The field was designed specifically to hold someone of Malgus's tremendous power. Testing had shown it could contain even a Dark Council member if necessary. It represented the absolute cutting edge of Alliance capabilities, combining Republic and Imperial knowledge to create something neither side could have achieved alone. They placed Malgus on that throne and activated the field. And there he sat, motionless and silent, while the Alliance leadership debated what to do with him. Some wanted him executed immediately. Malgus had betrayed the Empire twice, had led rebellions that cost countless lives, and represented too great a risk to keep alive. Better to eliminate the threat permanently than trust that their prison would hold him. Others argued for interrogation. Malgus knew things about the Empire, about Sith secrets, about the unknown regions that could prove invaluable. His tactical knowledge alone was worth preserving him for, even temporarily. The debate continued for days, while Malgus sat in his throne, seemingly content to simply exist within his prison. When Alliance representatives came to question him, he mostly remained silent. When they tried various techniques to extract information, he resisted with the mental discipline of a Sith who had survived decades of the most intense training imaginable. But eventually, Malgus did speak, and what he said was characteristically direct and ominous. He told the Alliance commander that they were fools if they thought imprisoning him solved anything, that what he had started could not be stopped because it was bigger than him, that he had revealed truths long buried, paths to power concealed by thrones and hidden by councils. Most chillingly, he claimed to have seen a vision of the future, a galaxy in flames, with everything the Alliance had built crumbling to ash. And he suggested that this future was not merely possible, but inevitable, that forces were already in motion that would bring about the very destruction the Alliance existed to prevent. When pressed about Darth Nul and her secrets, Malgus revealed something surprising. Much of what the Alliance knew about Nul was false. The historical records had been altered, probably by the Emperor himself, to hide the true significance of her work. She had not simply been another ambitious Sith Lord researching forbidden techniques. She had discovered something fundamental about the Force itself, some truth that threatened the very foundations of both Sith and Jedi philosophies. And someone else had found her holocron. During Malgus's investigation on Ilum, he had dropped the device while fleeing from the Alliance. A young Force-sensitive named Sahar Katin had discovered it in the ruins. Now Nul's knowledge was out in the galaxy again, in the hands of someone who had no understanding of the dangers it represented. The Alliance scrambled to find Sahar, to recover the holocron, to prevent Nul's secrets from spreading. But Malgus's influence extended even from his prison. Sahar began having visions of him, his presence somehow reaching across the distance between them through the dark side. He whispered to her about the lies the Jedi and Sith told, about how both orders concealed truth from those they deemed unworthy of knowledge. While Sahar grappled with these revelations, another crisis was brewing. The hidden chain, led by a field marshal named Heta Kol, was becoming increasingly bold in their operations. They seemed to be trying to utilize Nul's techniques for their own purposes, creating Force sensitives through methods the Alliance could not understand. And then Shae Vizsla, the legendary Mandalorian who had once fought alongside Malgus at the sacking of Coruscant, appeared at the prison. She had her own reasons for wanting to speak with Malgus. Heta Kol's forces were threatening Mandalorian territories, and Vizsla believed Malgus might know something about the hidden chain's goals and capabilities. What happened next shocked everyone who learned of it. Vizsla released Darth Malgus from his prison. She did not do so lightly. The decision came after consultation with mysterious Force users on Voss, who suggested that Malgus was crucial to understanding and potentially stopping what the hidden chain was attempting. Whether Vizsla truly believed this, or had her own reasons for freeing one of the most dangerous beings in the galaxy, remains unclear. But the result was indisputable. Darth Malgus was free again, no longer bound by prison or cybernetic controls, answering to no master and pursuing his own agenda with single-minded determination. Philosophy of the Unchained. Throughout his long life, Darth Malgus developed a philosophical framework that set him apart from most Sith Lords. His beliefs were not merely rationalizations for personal ambition, but genuinely held convictions about how the Force worked and how civilizations should be structured to align with the Force's fundamental nature. At the core of Malgus's philosophy was his belief that conflict was not merely inevitable, but necessary. He saw the Force itself as inherently dualistic, containing both light and dark in eternal opposition. The Jedi's attempts to eliminate the dark side and the Sith's dreams of extinguishing the light were both fundamentally misguided because they sought to destroy half of what the Force was. But while Malgus acknowledged the necessity of both sides existing, he firmly believed that the dark side was stronger. Not morally superior, he had no interest in moral philosophy, but functionally more powerful. The dark side embraced passion, rage, and ambition, channeling these emotions into tangible power. The light side demanded restraint, selflessness, and peace, which Malgus saw as artificial limitations that prevented Jedi from accessing their full potential. This led to his second major philosophical position, that both the Jedi Order and the Sith Empire were failing their respective philosophies by limiting who could access Force training. The Jedi would only teach those who met their standards of emotional control. The Sith would only elevate humans and purebloods to positions of real authority. Both were excluding potentially powerful Force users based on arbitrary criteria. Malgus believed this was not just inefficient, but actively harmful. Every being denied training based on species or emotional temperament represented lost potential, lost strength that could have served the galaxy's evolution toward greater conflict and thus greater refinement. This conviction led to his advocacy for alien integration in the Empire, his willingness to work with non-human mercenaries, and ultimately his declaration that the new empire would be built on pure meritocracy. He was not particularly progressive in any conventional sense. He was not arguing for equality out of compassion or moral principle. He simply recognized that excluding capable warriors based on their species was strategically foolish. Perhaps his most revolutionary belief, and the one that ultimately drove both his rebellions, was his conviction that institutional authority was itself a chain that needed to be broken. The Sith Code spoke of breaking chains and achieving freedom, but most Sith interpreted this to mean personal advancement within established hierarchies. They would break the chains to their masters, certainly, but only to become masters themselves, perpetuating the same structures. Malgus rejected this. True freedom, he believed, meant freedom from all external authority, not just from one's master, but from the Dark Council, from the Emperor, from the very concept of someone else having the right to command him. He would serve no one. He would bow to no throne. He would chart his own path according to his own understanding of what the dark side demanded. This made him dangerous in a way that most Sith Lords never achieved. Ambitious Sith who wanted personal power could be predicted, managed, potentially turned against each other. But Malgus wanted to tear down the entire structure and rebuild from fundamentals. There was no compromising with that kind of conviction. In his later years, after his repeated defeats and imprisonments, Malgus's philosophy evolved further. He began to articulate a belief that both Sith and Jedi were fundamentally tools of control, that both orders used the Force to maintain hierarchies and deny truth to those they deemed unworthy. His search for Darth Nul's secrets was partly driven by this conviction. He believed Nul had discovered truths that both orders had collaborated to suppress because those truths threatened their authority. When he spoke from his prison, Malgus presented himself as a revolutionary seeking to liberate the galaxy from the tyranny of Force-using orders who claimed to know what was best for everyone, whether this was genuine philosophical evolution or merely a new justification for his same old desire to rebuild civilization according to his preferences, is a question historians still debate. But regardless of motivation, the impact of Malgus's philosophy was undeniable. His advocacy for alien integration, though unsuccessful during his lifetime, planted seeds that would eventually bear fruit in a more diverse Imperial officer corps. His challenges to the Dark Council's authority contributed to that institution's eventual decline. His emphasis on conflict as necessary rather than shameful influenced how future Sith understood their relationship to the Force. Even his failures taught important lessons. The new empire demonstrated that pure meritocracy without any political structure was unsustainable in practice. His repeated defeats proved that power alone was insufficient against coordinated opposition. His imprisonments showed that even the strongest individual could be contained by institutional forces. Yet, despite these failures, despite multiple defeats and captures, Malgus never wavered in his core beliefs. He never accepted that he had been wrong about conflict, or about strength, or about the chains that needed to be broken. He remained until the very end absolutely convinced that his vision of the galaxy was correct, and that everyone else was simply too weak or too blind to see it. Powers and combat mastery. Darth Malgus was, without question, one of the most formidable combatants of his era. His reputation as a warrior was earned through decades of frontline combat against the Republic's finest soldiers and the Jedi Order's greatest masters. Understanding his capabilities requires examining both his lightsaber skills and his mastery of Force techniques. In lightsaber combat, Malgus was primarily a practitioner of Form Phi, known as Gemso or Xian, depending on specific application. This form emphasized powerful strikes and aggressive defense, turning an opponent's attack back against them with overwhelming force. It suited Malgus perfectly. He was a large man, standing well over 2 meters tall, with tremendous physical strength that he could channel through his strikes. But Malgus did not limit himself to a single form. He had trained in all 7 classical lightsaber forms during his time at the Academy and could adapt his style to counter specific opponents. His combat philosophy favored overwhelming aggression, but he was not simply a brute who relied on strength alone. His technique was flawless, honed through decades of practice and real combat experience. One of his signature techniques was the use of Jarkai, wielding 2 lightsabers simultaneously. He demonstrated this during the Battle of Korriban, calling his fallen master's weapon to his hand and using both blades to overwhelm Khao Chen Darach. The technique required ambidextrous coordination and tremendous concentration, managing 2 blades in patterns that complemented rather than interfered with each other. Malgus also incorporated significant acrobatic elements into his fighting style despite his size. He could leap tremendous distances using force-enhanced jumps, attacking from unexpected angles and forcing opponents to constantly adjust their defensive positions. His speed in combat was extraordinary. Witnesses described his movements as too fast for non-Force users to track clearly, a blur of motion that ended with enemies dead before they realized they had been struck. But perhaps most distinctive was how Malgus channeled his rage into combat. Unlike some Sith who became sloppy when angry, who allowed emotion to override technique, Malgus used his rage with surgical precision. Every ounce of his fury was focused into strikes that carried not just physical force, but the weight of dark side energy. He described this in his journals as achieving clarity of purpose rage so pure that it sharpened rather than clouded his judgment. His Force abilities were equally impressive. Malgus demonstrated mastery of all the standard dark side techniques, force lightning that could kill multiple opponents simultaneously, telekinetic blasts powerful enough to throw warriors across chambers, force choke that could crush windpipes from across a battlefield. But he also displayed techniques that went beyond basic application. The Force Scream was one of his most devastating abilities. By channeling his rage through a vocalization augmented by the Force, Malgus could create a wave of destructive energy that destroyed equipment, stunned opponents, and in extreme cases, caused physical structures to collapse. He described one instance of unleashing a Force Scream powerful enough to overload the fuel systems of incoming ships, causing them to explode in mid-flight. Force Maelstrom was another advanced technique Malgus mastered. This involved creating a barrier of Force energy around himself, then releasing it in all directions in a devastating wave. The effect was similar to a bomb exploding with Malgus at the epicenter, hurling everything away from him while simultaneously channeling dark side energy that could incapacitate even Force-sensitive opponents through sheer, overwhelming power. His telekinetic abilities extended beyond simple pushing and pulling. Malgus demonstrated the capacity for Force Crush, using telekinesis to compress objects or beings with such force that bones shattered and armor crumpled. He could also perform precise telekinetic manipulations mid-combat, snatching weapons from opponents' hands or redirecting thrown objects back at their origin. Perhaps most impressively, Malgus showed an ability to use the Force to enhance his physical capabilities beyond what even most Sith achieved. His strength in combat came not just from his natural size, but from channeling Force energy through his muscles, allowing him to strike with power that seemed impossible, given the laws of physics. His armor absorbed tremendous damage, but this was partly because Malgus could use Force barriers to reinforce it, turning conventional protection into something far more resilient. The respirator mask he was forced to wear after Alderaan actually became an advantage in some ways. While it limited his verbal communication and made him dependent on technology for survival, the mask also filtered toxins and allowed him to fight in environments that would have been lethal to normal beings. More significantly, the constant reminder of his near-death experience fueled his rage continuously, giving him a wellspring of dark side energy to draw upon. His combat endurance was legendary. Malgus could fight for hours without showing significant fatigue, sustained by the dark side and his sheer determination. Historical records document instances of him battling through entire squads of Republic soldiers, then immediately engaging Jedi Masters in extended duels, without any apparent decrease in capability. But for all his tremendous power, Malgus had weaknesses that careful opponents could exploit. His fighting style favored aggression over defense, and while his technique prevented this from being a fatal flaw against most opponents, sufficiently skilled combatants could turn his aggression against him. His rage, while a source of power, could also be manipulated, making him angry enough could occasionally cause him to abandon optimal tactics in favor of direct assault. Most significantly, his physical dependence on the respirator represented a genuine vulnerability. If an opponent could damage the device severely enough, Malgus would be unable to breathe and forced to either retreat or rely entirely on the Force to keep himself alive. Few were skilled enough to exploit this weakness, but it existed. Nevertheless, When evaluating Darth Malgus purely as a warrior, the conclusion is inescapable. He was one of the most dangerous combatants of his entire era. Satele Shan herself, who fought him multiple times and eventually rose to Grand Master of the Jedi Order, described him as the most dangerous embodiment of the dark side she had ever experienced. Coming from someone who had also faced Darth Angral and other Dark Council members, that assessment carried tremendous weight. Legacy and impact. Thousands of years after his death, Darth Malgus remained a figure of study and controversy. His journals survived, passing through various hands until they reached none other than Darth Sidious, who included excerpts in his Book of Sith anthology. This ensured that Malgus's philosophy and tactical insights would influence Sith thinking even millennia after his time. What did Malgus leave to galactic history? The answers are complex and sometimes contradictory. On a military level, his campaigns demonstrated the importance of overwhelming force applied without hesitation or moral constraint. The sacking of Coruscant became a case study in how to conduct surprise attacks on heavily defended positions, analyzed by military academies in both the Republic and Empire for generations. His tactics in the unknown regions showed how to build loyalty among alien populations, lessons that later Imperial commanders would ignore to their detriment. Philosophically, Malgus represented a challenge to both Sith and Jedi orthodoxy that neither order fully addressed. His argument that both sides were limiting the Force's potential by restricting who could access training raised questions that persisted long after his death. While the Jedi Order never seriously considered abandoning their standards for who could become a Jedi, the Sith Empire did gradually become more accepting of non-human members in positions of authority, partially due to the practical examples Malgus had set of aliens serving effectively. His emphasis on breaking chains took the Sith Code's rhetoric and pushed it to its logical conclusion. If the Sith truly believed in breaking chains and achieving freedom, then why should they accept the authority of the Dark Council or the Emperor? Malgus forced every subsequent generation of Sith to grapple with that question. And while most concluded that some hierarchy was necessary for the Empire to function, the question itself could not be unasked. The new Empire, despite its brief existence and failure, demonstrated that alternative structures were at least theoretically possible. Malgus showed that a Sith Empire based on pure meritocracy rather than species could be assembled, that it could function operationally, and that it represented a genuine threat to established powers. The fact that it ultimately failed did not erase the proof of concept. Perhaps most significantly, Malgus represented the logical endpoint of Sith philosophy when taken seriously, rather than as mere rhetoric. The Sith claimed to worship strength, to believe that conflict was necessary, to seek freedom from all constraints. Malgus actually lived by those principles completely, refusing to compromise them even when doing so would have been politically expedient. This made him dangerous in a way that most Sith Lords never achieved. Ambitious Sith who wanted personal power could be predicted, managed, and manipulated. But how did you predict or manage someone who genuinely believed in his philosophy so completely that he would rather die than compromise it? How did you negotiate with someone who rejected the entire premise of negotiation? The answer, as the galaxy learned repeatedly, was that you couldn't. You could only defeat Malgus through overwhelming force and then ensure he stayed defeated through constant vigilance. Every time authorities assumed he was neutralized, every time they thought they had broken his will or controlled his actions, he proved them wrong. His personal impact on galactic history was profound. He killed Jedi Master Venzalo, whose death influenced the trajectory of the Jedi Order. He destroyed the Jedi Temple on Coruscant, a blow to Jedi prestige that took decades to recover from. He forced the Treaty of Coruscant through his military successes, reshaping galactic politics for an entire generation. His relationship with Elena Daru and her ultimate fate became a cautionary tale about the cost of Sith philosophy. Here was a Sith Lord capable of genuine love, yet he killed the woman he loved because his philosophy demanded it. The story was told and retold, interpreted differently by different groups. The Jedi saw it as proof that the dark side inevitably corrupted, destroyed, while some Sith viewed it as the ultimate demonstration of commitment to power over weakness. The fact that her death seemed to make him stronger rather than weaker complicated both interpretations. Did killing Elena prove the dark side was irredeemably evil, or did it prove that such sacrifices genuinely did increase one's power? The question had no easy answer. In artistic representations, Malgus became an icon. His distinctive appearance, the imposing armor, the respirator mask, the crimson lightsaber, made him instantly recognizable. Centuries after his time, artists continued depicting the sacking of Coruscant with Malgus at its center, standing amid the burning temple as a symbol of Sith power unrestrained. But beyond his military achievements and philosophical legacy, perhaps Malgus's greatest impact was simply demonstrating that one individual, if sufficiently skilled and determined, could challenge the established order. He was not born to any great Sith bloodline. He had no prophesied destiny. He was simply a warrior who decided that the galaxy needed to change and committed everything to making that change happen. That he ultimately failed, that his new empire crumbled, and his rebellions were defeated, did not erase the fact that for a time he had forced both the Sith Empire and the Galactic Republic to unite against him. One man had threatened institutions that had endured for thousands of years. One Sith Lord had made emperors and councils and grand masters genuinely afraid. And even in defeat, even imprisoned and controlled, he continued to influence events. His very existence forced others to react, to plan around him, to consider what he might do if given any opportunity. Few beings in galactic history could claim that kind of enduring impact. When historians of later eras evaluated the Sith Lords of the Old Republic period, the rankings were inevitably controversial, but Darth Malgus consistently appeared near the top of any list of the most influential. Not necessarily the most powerful in raw force ability, the Emperor and others exceeded him there. Not the most successful in achieving their goals, his rebellions both failed. But in terms of sheer impact on galactic affairs, in terms of forcing the galaxy to acknowledge him and respond to his actions, few could match what Malgus had achieved. His journals, preserved and studied by later Sith, contained passages that would influence dark side philosophy for millennia. His tactical innovations appeared in imperial military doctrine long after his death. His arguments about meritocracy and alien integration eventually gained acceptance, though not in his lifetime. And his example of a Sith who genuinely lived the philosophy rather than merely using it as justification for personal ambition, stood as both inspiration and warning to every subsequent generation that studied his life. Conclusion: the story of Darth Malgus is the story of a galaxy in conflict, of philosophies tested through fire, of power sought and sacrificed and sought again. From his birth as Veradun on storm-racked Droman Khas, to his final imprisonment in a Force-reinforced throne designed specifically to hold him, his life spanned some of the most significant events in Old Republic history. He was present at the beginning of the Great Galactic War, leading the recapture of Korriban and killing his own master when weakness was revealed. He fought at Alderaan and carried the scars of that battle for the rest of his life. He personally led the assault on the Jedi Temple and stood victorious in its burning halls, having achieved what many thought impossible. He loved Elena Daru with a genuine affection that seemed incompatible with Sith philosophy, then killed her to prove his commitment to power over attachment. He fought in the unknown regions, building alliances and expanding imperial control while developing the revolutionary ideas that would eventually lead to his rebellion. He declared himself emperor of a new empire built on principles of meritocracy and absolute conflict, challenging both the Sith Empire and the Republic simultaneously. He was defeated, apparently killed, then returned as the Empress's wrath, before breaking free once more. He sought the forbidden knowledge of Darth Nul, convinced that both Sith and Jedi were hiding truths that threatened their authority. He was captured and imprisoned in a device designed by the combined expertise of Republic and Imperial engineers. And even from that prison, his influence continued to shape events, his words and warnings affecting those who came to question him. Was he right? Did the Force demand conflict as he claimed? Was strength through pure meritocracy a better foundation than the hierarchies both Sith and Jedi maintained? Were both orders hiding fundamental truths to maintain their authority? History provides no definitive answers to these questions. What is certain is that Darth Malgus forced the galaxy to grapple with them, to justify their assumptions and defend their philosophies against someone who questioned everything. He was brutal. He was uncompromising. He killed countless beings in pursuit of his vision. The suffering he inflicted cannot be dismissed or excused, regardless of his philosophical justifications. But he was also genuine in ways that few Sith ever managed. He believed in his philosophy completely. He lived it without compromise or hypocrisy. He broke his chains again and again, refusing to accept any authority over him. And in doing so, Darth Malgus left an indelible mark on galactic history that no amount of time could erase. His legacy lives on not just in historical records, but in the questions he forced everyone to confront. What does it mean to truly break your chains? Is conflict necessary for strength, or simply inevitable? Should power be distributed based on merit alone, or do other factors matter? Can one individual change the galaxy through force of will alone? The answers vary depending on who you ask and when you ask them, but the questions remain, passed down through generations, studied by scholars and strategists and Force users seeking to understand both the light and the dark. And somewhere, perhaps in records not yet discovered, perhaps in secrets hidden by those who feared his legacy, perhaps in the very Force itself, the presence of Darth Malgus endures, not as a ghost or spirit, but as an idea that cannot be killed, a challenge to authority that cannot be permanently suppressed, a reminder that individuals who refuse to accept limits can reshape history regardless of the cost. This has been the complete history of Darth Malgus, from birth to betrayal to imprisonment to legacy. A Sith Lord who walked into the Jedi Temple and emerged victorious. A revolutionary who challenged empires. A warrior who made the galaxy acknowledge him through sheer force of will. May his story serve as both inspiration and warning to all who hear it, in whatever era they live and whatever cause they serve. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the history of one of the old Republic's most influential Sith Lords, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. There's so much more Star Wars lore to explore, so many stories waiting to be told. Until next time, may the Force be with you, or against you, as you prefer.